Welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, the podcast that helps you harness the power of Google Ads. And now your host, Jeremy Young.
Hello and welcome back to Google Ads Unleashed, guys. Hope everyone is doing fabulously this Monday. And today I am warning you need to protect your brand. We have spoken about this topic very, very often, right? So in the past, I've done multiple pods on how to properly set up a brand campaign, right? A brand search, how to properly split brand and non-brand with PMax and shopping, hacks for brand search, right? What ideal bid strategy to choose, for instance, or what ideal settings to choose, or for instance also what ideal sort of landing pages you can make, right? But I've also talked about how incremental it is, that very often it might make no sense to actually bid on brand whatsoever. For instance, if you're flogging a lot of volume on non-brand anyway, and there's no one else bidding on your branded name. But today I want to share a lesson with you from an audit that I actually carried out last night. So a client came to us in the, food niche. Basically, they make a very specific type of breakfast set, which is all I can reveal at this stage. And they've got one big competitor who do exactly the same product. And they've come to me at the beginning of February and have lamented that their Google Ads performance seems to have gone down massively, but their spend has actually gone up. And overall, they are behind last year's revenue in total in January versus the previous year. Would I mind doing a paid audit to have a look at what is going on? So I did. And I want to share this audit with you because there's a very expensive lesson in there. I know I've done an audit pod the other day, but I think this is something like I've never quite seen before in that extent. And it shows that you can never, ever have one rule for everything in Google, right? Like never run brand search or always run brand search and so on. There's always nuances. And it also shows how interconnected channels are. Let's dive right in. So basically, when this client came to us, they actually were looking at some wild and dire figures, okay? So what I'm going to try and do in parallel is that I'm going to try and get all of the triple whale data up at the same time to sort of show you a little bit, or to sort of try and paint a visual picture of where they are year on year. So overall, they were about 20% down year on year in revenue, okay? Their meta ad spend was actually a little less year on year as well, although ROAS efficiency seemed to have gone a little bit up. So if we actually look now at last month versus previous year, let's have a look at the data whilst it's loading. We can see, yes, their sales were about down 20% year on year, and their total ad spend had gone down about 13%. Also, their overall ROAS was a tiny bit worse, 5%. And what really stood out to me is that their NCACs, or new customer costs, went up quite a bit, and their conversion rate had tanked by about 20%, although they had the same number of sessions and typically actually better data with everything else. So they had a better cost per add to cart. They seem to have had longer session durations, etc., etc. So what's going on here? So the first thing that I've then looked at is the sort of year-on-year numbers in terms of the channels. And there I saw that meta ads had actually spent a little bit less year-on-year, okay? So I had then a look at the numbers. We're talking a total of Sorry, the data is loading. It's not always that fast, Triple Whale, I'm afraid. They spent about 20% less year on year on Meta ads, but with a much better efficiency on platform. To me, this suggested the following. On platform, the ROAS figures actually gone down, on Triple Whale up, that they probably throttled the spend a little bit on Meta year on year because they just didn't see overall figures improve as much as they would have hoped. Thus, they didn't really end up spending on Meta ads so much. Given that their overall conversion rate is lower as well, to me this suggests that there is something overarchingly wrong with how people closed the deal, especially if the add to cart, cost per add to cart has actually gone down. So people were interested, but they didn't actually pull the trigger. Conversely, I saw that Google ad spend was up 25% year on year, but ROAS had tanked by 60%. Up to 70% on platform even, and purchases had only gone down by 55%, suggesting that probably a lot of branded traffic must have taken a hit. The reason I'm thinking this is because ROAS had dropped disproportionately to the number of purchases. That's always a very good indicator that very likely there's something wrong with the brand traffic, because that typically yields the highest ROAS. So if ROAS tanks significantly, but the same number of purchases doesn't tank linearly, then very likely there's something up with the brand traffic. They have more spend year on year though, which is very surprising. So to me that suggests they probably shifted more of the spend towards Google Ads, but forgot about brand completely. So I then dove into what is actually going on. First of all, I had a look at their keyword planner and had a look, is actually search volume changed for the product? For instance, is there more or less demand for the product that they sell year on year? And as it turns out, there had actually been a drop of 15% in non-branded search demand year on year for the products that they offer, okay? Which is very surprising to me, because that suggests it was maybe not a very good idea to try and lean too much into the non-brand side of Google and shift more budget towards there. But I'm also seeing in the ad account that more spend went to a couple of new products that they had, and that they tried a lot of demand gen, which is fair enough, and which has actually worked pretty decent as well, okay? Then I had a look at the branded traffic, because what my hypothesis is maybe the branded traffic is affected because they've spent less on Meta ads. Ergo, there's fewer people searching for brand. Ergo, that's why we're seeing fewer purchases on Google and a lot lower ROAS. And that suggests that they falsely maybe looked for the reason within Google Ads. But then that actually Meta Ads is to blame, that there's such a performance drop on Google year on year. Okay. So then I had a look into that, and the branded traffic actually stayed relatively stable, if not improved year on year. Even since November, it had been higher than November 24 and higher in December 24. And also when I look at the brand search, which year on year has been basically unchanged, and I'm now meaning the search campaign, I could actually see that impressions had stayed the same or had gone up slightly as well, suggesting that clearly there's quite a lot of brand awareness, and that the volume of the brand traffic is not as much as an issue as we thought, although it is not in line with what we're seeing. So bit of a contrarian thing, but brand awareness can be obviously not always correlating one-to-one with the Meta ad spend, but can be supported, of course, by other activities or by just general awareness that carries throughout the months and the activity throughout the year. So then I had a look at the conversion tracking, because usually I always try to go a bit like this. I always look at the sort of the overall volumes, and then in the next step see if there's a technical issue. For instance, has something tanked in Merchant Center, which there hasn't? Has something gone wrong in conversion tracking? For instance, with a lot of analyses that we do, we see worse data year on year, but then actually we look at last year's data and see a repeat rate in the conversions in purchases differences of 2 or whatever, and we can see actually last year the data was completely duplicated, which of course absolutely distorts the figures year on year and paints a wrong picture, okay? But we also see in triple whale that it's gone down. So I really just double checked that is the issue, because otherwise we would have seen a different story in triple whale, okay? Like for instance, same data in triple whale, but only in the ad account it fluctuated massively, all right? So everything was fine there. Like I said, everything was fine with the feed. Some smaller things could be fixed. Some smaller other things could be fixed. Then I had a look at what the campaigns did year on year. And I had a look at where the spend went, and exactly the same picture emerged, which I had suspected. More spend went into non-branded traffic, and a few more sales are generated. It was all looking okay. But overall, we had about 3,200 fewer sales year on year. And then I had a look at where we lost those. And it hit me like a brick. All of those sales were lost in branded traffic, in search brand and in shopping brand. Absolutely all of them, all right? From those 3,200, 3,500 roughly, 3,000 were lost in branded search and 500 were lost in branded shopping. So I had a first look into brand shopping, whether there was maybe some sort of issue with the brand and non-brand split not being correct. That was not the case. Then I had a look at the branded search to see, was there maybe an issue sort of versus last year. Did that play out differently? But it was the same structure last year as well, so there was no kind of difference, which got me then thinking to look at some of the metrics that may suggest that something is up with competition here, okay? So impressions roughly stayed the same. Cost had gone down significantly because we generated a lot fewer clicks. 80% fewer clicks year on year on brand, which is absolutely insane, okay? Then maybe I'll actually filter down on just them 2 campaigns so I can consolidate the metrics here, which may be an interesting insight for all of you. So overall, we generated 80% fewer clicks, right? And we spent overall only 20% less in total costs, okay? That is an alarm bell to me. How can we have just that little less spend with the same sort of number of impressions year on year, but so much less in so much fewer clicks, okay? Then I looked at the click-through rate, and that had tanked by 66% year on year on branded traffic. And I thought to myself, well, there's something clearly is in the bush with how it's playing out and what competitors are likely doing. So this suggests to me volume is there, but we're not showing enough and we're not winning enough clicks, either due to competition or wrong bid strategy. CPCs, however, had gone up by 270% year on year as well. And then I'd seen that we had tanked by 80% in sales. Conversion rate had gone down hugely, 20%. And overall, I then looked at some very interesting metrics. And these were, first of all, the search impression share, which on normal branded search remained interestingly very relatively stable, but tanked massively in shopping. But now comes the most important part, search absolute top impression share and search top impression share. That had tanked by 80%. So although we didn't show in the top positions anymore. And we had actually lost most of the impression share due to worse ad rank, which didn't exist last year. There was basically 0% on both search lost, impression share, and ad rank and budget. And we had lost 75% in the click share. So all of this suggested there's something up with competition. So then I looked at the auction insights for search last year and for shopping last year versus this year. And I identified one competitor who was absolutely blast in the auction year on year compared to the previous year. Bear in mind, guys, we would have noticed this very likely quite quickly, but I'm doing an audit now after the fact, so it's unfortunately a little too late. But that's why it's always pays to have a good Google Ads manager, because that's the whole thing that they look at. And then I actually just simulated an auction in the country where this client resides. And it hit me like an absolute brick. We were seeing that competitor using my client's branded search name appearing above our own branded ads. So what had happened is that they were using our client's branded search, which is not allowed, by the way. You can't use that in the headlines and the descriptions, etc., especially as it's trademarked, to trick the quality score into showing it. And they even had the cheek of saying our client's name, alternative, right? They were sending it to their offer page, which I then had a quick look at. And there it hit me like a brick as well, is that they were not only a tiny bit cheaper, only €1 cheaper, but here comes the kicker: because of this food that you buy, you have to pick flavors. Their offer bundle was actually a choice of 10 smaller packets of various flavors that you could test as a discovery packet, whereas with our client you had to commit to 2 big tubs of this food, and you could only pick 2 flavors. So objectively their offer was actually better. Also their PDP was slightly better, etc. And it turns out that we probably lost about 150,000 euros in turnover, maybe even a little bit more in January, because the brand search didn't properly protect against this competitor, and more or less they were feeding on the brand awareness that our client enjoys, and they were also feeding off the meta ads of our clients, because traditionally the meta ads were always hoovered up by Google branded searches, which didn't happen anymore, which also explains how all of this correlated. So meta ads was spending, generating brand awareness, that puffed into nothingness, explaining the lower conversion rate and also the hesitance of people buying a certain product or offer where another competitor jumped onto this branded search and offered a better alternative. Now, how do you fix this? You have to, first of all, fight back, increase the CPCs and just bite the bullet when it comes to that, right? You would probably have to mop up, do an overhaul on the ad copy as well, potentially make a better offer page. But something that we suggested to the client as well is to certainly activate a lawyer, right? There is absolutely nothing that you can do now in terms of fighting back, and just using their keywords is something that would be silly. But we have screenshots of the competitor wrongly using the branded search name, which is not allowed. And I'm pretty sure that a good lawyer could even try and subpoena an ad account and get the information, and we could kind of prove that this has actually mopped up a ton of sales which shouldn't have happened before. Okay. A few more tips were to probably up the bids, what I said, maybe even switch a bid strategy to target impression share to either absolute top or top with a higher bid. Also put the branded search on a better offer rather than just the homepage. Also, I suggested that they consolidate their ad account structure, because since they left us a year and a half ago, they went a bit haywire and aren't letting Google do the heavy lifting. Also, they had a few other things which were probably things that you could improve pretty easily, like making sure that the audiences that they've uploaded, the first-party data to the Google Ads account works better, a couple other things with the feed, etc., etc. But overall, this is just a super interesting case study that shows it always depends. It really, I know I hate this sentence, but it generally always depends. There is something to be said about branded search not always being incremental, but that's why you always test that. And in doubt, you'd rather always defend your own branded searches and not leave it to others, if especially you've seen a competitor being this aggressive. Okay, some advanced strategies potentially would be to create advertorial pages as well against your competitors, which is completely legal, to fight back a little bit there, because that's the best way to get them back to a certain degree. And if you want to find out how to do this, and if this story resonated, if you need any help, need a view in your ad account, we do actually do one-off audits as well to have a check of your current situation, right? If you want to book that, just message me at jeremy@younganddigital.marketing. You can also find me at Jeremy Young Google Ads on LinkedIn, and you can also book a one-to-one call with me via the website younganddigital.marketing. Little PSA, we're actually currently looking for a new growth manager, SEA growth manager, to join the team. So if you want to join you must be UK based. There is absolutely no way you can unfortunately join if you're from abroad. You have to be UK based. But if you are UK based, if you are interested in joining a young and dynamic, vibrant team that manages really interesting Google Ads accounts and grows British and European brands, then you're at the right space. Drop me a message. This has been Jeremy Young, your personal Google Ads expert, and I wish you a happy and productive week ahead.
Thank you for listening to Google Ads Unleashed. To connect with Jeremy, check him out online at www.younganddigital.marketing. We'll see you next time.